The crowd went wild as Donald Trump appeared before the RNC displaying an ear bandage from his near brush with death. Now, it's not customary for a nominee to show up on the first day, but Trump likely broke with tradition to show the world that he's not afraid. Elon Musk is putting his money where his vote is, pledging to shell out $45 million a month for a Trump super PAC. Musk endorsed Trump shortly after the assassination attempt and will provide more than $150 million if this pledge holds true for Donald Trump. Kimberly Cheadle, the Biden-appointed head of the Secret Service, says that she accepts responsibility for the Trump assassination attempt. However, that responsibility seems to end at consequences as she won't be stepping down. Cheadle has pushed for her department to be 30% female rather than 100% competent. We have those stories and much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, July 16th. Everybody is still talking about the Donald Trump assassination attempt. And now with me is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze Media. And Matthew, you were out in California, a very difficult place for conservatives to be when this went down. So take me through what it was like for your experience when you saw this.
Yeah, so I was actually out there for the wedding of a Blaze News friend, James Polis from Zero Hour, host of Zero Hour here at Blaze. We wish him and his new bride-to-be well. During that time, right, I was in California as this all unfolded. And I want to say, first off, I think everyone is unpacking three emotions that you saw run throughout the country. And I'm sure some of you out there felt yourself as you saw the video and in the last couple of days have sort of progressed, right? First is anger. I mean, let's be honest. On the right, we're looking around. This was not unexpected. For a lot of us, we thought this sort of thing could happen because of the rhetoric of the last 8 years. That anger obviously needs to be channeled into something good, right? But everyone is feeling that, and you can see the press sense it. They're moving back. Second is a love of Donald Trump. I mean, you look at him now and you see something that has transcended normal politician status. What happened was a miracle. What happened was something that was really the most iconic moment that Americans have experienced together publicly in decades. And that won't be forgotten. And so the love of Trump that you see in the crowd has continued. There's a mushroom cloud across the country of people coming out in support of Trump. And then third is sadness, because we see something has changed in this country. We've ascended into another level of division, and we're moving forward into something that's very different, right, than we've experienced in the past. And then last, and this is what I'll say about California, last is hope. There's rays of sunshine all of a sudden outside and a feeling of freedom, even in California, where I saw many people wearing MAGA shirts in Trader Joe's or flying flags, on the side of the highway. And you can see this throughout the country. People just announcing, I used to be quiet, but I'm not quiet anymore. I fully endorse Donald Trump.
Well, there are rays of hope and sunshine out in Milwaukee. Day 2 of the RNC is in full swing. This focus today will be on illegal immigration, and we're even going to see an appearance from Trump's primary opponent, Nikki Haley. So let's bring in Chris Bedford now. He is the senior politics editor and Washington correspondent for Blaze News, who has just a beautiful setup there in Milwaukee, I might add, Chris. When we see this, though, Matthew was just talking about the hope that everybody is talking about with Donald Trump. You were there last night. What was that energy like when Trump walked into the ballroom?
It's absolutely jubilant. It was electric. The convention had been kind of slowly gaining steam over the course of all of Monday, in part due to the fact that these things are always chaotic. It probably takes the average person maybe 90 minutes to figure out how to circumvent the different security measures in the hot sun. So things kind of get off a little slowly. But then it started to build and build. And it's extremely unusual to see a president and a nominee show up on Monday of a convention. Oftentimes they're not even in the city this early if they're already the presumptive nominee. They'll fly in a little later. So to see him there, to see him up with Tucker, to see him up with His vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, just electrified the room. And it started off with some humor when you had the benediction and the Catholic priest who did a impersonation of Donald Trump about how great and how blessed everyone was going to be. It's amazing to see the feelings at this RNC and understand just how close we were, millimeters, 5 miles per hour wind, the hand of God, how close we were to a completely different RNC and a major political assassination.
Chris, what are you seeing today? I mean, what's changed? You went through some of the big moments of yesterday. What are we moving into on the second day?
The excitement is here. It starts a little later. Folks are just getting in there. The delegates are lining up for a whole other day of programming. And sort of the business of the party. A lot of these folks who come out here on their own dime. They're really party faithful. They've been doing this for decades. Some of the arguments I've seen between 80-year-old women who have obviously been friends for 60 years have been priceless. And this is they're political junkies. This is the sort of thing they live for. They love to see Riley Gaines walking by and the guys from Orange County Chopper coming out here. They love to see the celebrities and they're chasing Marjorie Taylor Greene around. It's a little bit of a festive atmosphere.
Now, Elon Musk isn't there, but everybody is excited about what he's doing because he is pledging $45 million a month to the Trump super PAC. So does that put an even bigger target on his back than when he initially went and bought Twitter?
My gosh, he's brave. He's been hitting politics pretty hard this week. First, you see that, the $45 million a month, which is a staggering amount of money to be put into these super PACs. I saw a bunch of super PAC-related guys last night, and all of them are hoping to get a little bit of that change. And then today, you have him going after Governor Gavin Newsom and saying that he's going to move his space company to Texas. And they're going to get out of there. They're no longer dealing with it. And it's because of California passing a law that you can hide from parents. You don't have to tell them when a child, an underage minor, is transitioning. He said, I warned them about this sort of behavior, and they did it anyways. My families and my workers aren't safe here. Their children aren't safe here, and they're going to move. He's come out as just a really interesting figure in American politics, not always on the side of the GOP or Donald Trump, but always just kind of a counter thinker and an independent thinker in an industry that hasn't had a lot of those in the last few years.
Yeah, Matthew, you hear Chris Bedford say that Elon Musk is going to move his headquarters to Texas. Now, we're seeing him do this a couple different times over, but he's doing it because of wokeness out of California. It feels like everything is moving towards the anti-woke measures now.
Yeah, I mean, what you see is just the bravery, right, of everyone moving in this moment. It's as if what's happened in the last couple of days has unlocked something, a current that's just moving faster and faster as people feel more free to tell the other side to dissent, to tell the powers that be no. I don't stand with you. I'm going to move in this direction. And that's happening all over the place.
And we're talking about Republicans now. But Chris, I want to bring you back in because I want to talk about a Democrat for a second, specifically Senator Bob Menendez. He was just convicted of federal corruption charges. I know that he was out there saying, oh, I have my reelection stuff going through as soon as a month ago. But what does this mean for his standing right now in the Senate?
Bob Menendez is one of the more corrupt senators, one of the more openly corrupt senators. Now he's finally been found guilty of it, and an incredibly arrogant politician. I've been dealing with him as a reporter and as an editor since probably 2010, 2011, when he was involved in all kinds of nefarious deeds. He's become just such an embarrassment for the Democrats. The Democrats just wanted to go away. You're not seeing the kind of support that you had seen for him previously when he'd been accused of different sorts of sordid activities and nighttime escapades. That support has evaporated. He's kind of a one-man island at this point. But sometimes folks get addicted to their own power. They believe their own hype. They think that they're a one-man army and that they can do whatever they want. So he's going to try and stick around. And this is something that the Democrats don't want at all. More bad news for them, if you could even imagine that.
He's trying to stick around. We want you to stick around because we'll be back with more from the RNC. Don't go anywhere. If you weren't following the news of the latest U.S. dollar, well, guess what? Some bad news came in June when Saudi Arabia did not renew the 50-year-old petrodollar deal with the United States. Since 1974, Saudi Arabia has sold oil solely in U.S. dollars, and that was huge for our economic global dominance. Now they want options, something other than the U.S. dollar. So I ask you, if there's less demand for the dollar, what happens to that dollar? Look, it's reasons like this that Americans turn to Birch Gold Group. For over 20 years, Birch Gold has helped tens of thousands of Americans protect their savings by converting an IRA or 401k into an IRA with physical gold. To learn more, be sure to text the word Jill to 989898 and claim your free no obligation info kit on gold. That's Jill to the number 989898. Birch Gold has earned my trust with their education first approach, their thousands of happy customers, and their countless 5-star reviews. Protect your savings with gold before the dollar plunges any further. Text Jill to 989898 today. We're back with Chris Bedford at the RNC in Milwaukee. Chris, who are some of the heavy hitters that you've managed to meet while walking around out there this week?
Well, we bumped into a couple good people. We bumped into Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. We hooked up with the guys from Orange County Choppers, the motorcycle construction show, where they actually built a chopper and brought it out here to give it as a gift to Riley Gaines, the swimmer, who we also caught up with, an activist. And one of the great things about these guys in the interviews that we'll show you here between me and Julio is how many of them, this is their first Republican convention. This is the first time that they've become politically active. Check it out.
Hi, Congresswoman. Thank you for coming, joining us here today. So J.D. Vance, as you just mentioned, he's now the vice presidential pick. What do you think that says with Trump picking him for the direction that the party is going to be going in the future?
Well, it's the direction that I want the party to go in, and that's going to be America first. I've come into the Republican Party as a member of Congress as someone that was upset with Republicans for not following through on the issues that we cared about, and many times Republicans campaigned on. And, our goal is to shape the Republican Party to be for America first, for our hard-earned tax dollars not to be going to foreign wars, but be, to secure our own border, for the American worker, for a tax program that's not going to enslave people into debt, and also a policy perspective and legislative agenda that will reduce the debt so that inflation comes down and the dollar strong.
So in the aftermath of the attempted assassination of former President Trump, Biden has pushed this idea that the country needs to unify, the rhetoric needs to be toned down, and some ads have been pulled down. Do you think that's going to be? Do you think that's working? Because he gave an interview recently and he was kind of using the same rhetoric that he was using before. Do you think that push for unity is going to work at all?
No. If Joe Biden and the Democrats were serious about unity, he would completely stop the weaponized Department of Justice that he has enabled. He would reel back Merrick Garland. He would drop all the charges against President Trump. He would release the political prisoners who are being held in prison for years now for protesting election fraud.
You hear her talk about J.D. Vance as the pick and going over all of the other talking points that we've had there for the RNC. But Matthew, I want to get your take first because you weren't here yesterday when we had the announcement of J.D. Vance as the vice presidential pick.
Yeah, I was overjoyed. I won't lie. I think J.D. Vance represents the new right moving forward. I think he understands the situation that we're in. And myself and many others have dealt with him over the years when he was trying to prove that he did understand where the party needed to go and that he did understand President Trump, because famously in the beginning he was anti-Trump. And so, during that process, I got to know more about him, and many of myself and my friends sort of interrogated him. And I've just come to see him as representative of the future in the Republican Party. So I think if you don't know much about him, you might have heard some ridiculous things about him. You need to give him a shot and pay attention because you're going to really like this guy.
And Chris, I read a story today in NBC News that I thought was very interesting because they said that it was going to be Doug Burgum initially, and then the sons, Don Jr. and Eric Trump, were supposedly jumping in and say he offers us nothing. We're basically like JD, JD, JD. So when you hear that, does that surprise you, or is that kind of what you had been hearing in Washington circles was more of a Doug Burgum, but now ultimately we get JD Vance?
In Washington circles, people were cautiously excited, conservative parts of Washington that is, cautiously excited that you would get J.D. Vance, but not particularly hopeful. I mean, the political forces that were pushing behind Marco Rubio, the fact that you had Rupert Murdoch, who, by the way, is no friend of Donald Trump at all, pushing Doug Burgum, the different aspects of Doug Burgum's life, from his height to his wife to his wealth and success that Donald Trump really does respect, those things were playing against Vance. So it was really happy to see it. And we have known that Don Jr. is close friends with J.D. Vance. They've really hit it off. And I think the sons are right. Donald Trump in some ways is really thinking about this election. That's what he's focused on. His sons might be thinking more broadly about the actual things that come after this. And with J.D. Vance is also an interesting character because he's butted heads with a lot of Republicans. You kind of heard this from Marjorie Taylor Greene there. She's one of the ones who's got a friend in the vice presidency if they win right now. She endorsed him early in his Senate run. She's taking credit, at least, for pushing Donald Trump to endorse him in his Senate run. So, while there's a couple of Republicans right now who are definitely smarting and wishing that they treated him maybe a little bit better in his short time in the Senate, some are going to have close allies.
Matthew, what's your take on that when you hear the back and forth between some of the final VP candidates?
I think at the end of the day, like there's a lot of noise there. What matters is moving forward. I think J.D. Vance does have some great friends in the Senate. He's part of, the super friends in the Senate who are doing the right thing. So, I forget the noise. He's going to be great. Give him a shot.
Chris, what do we have coming up for the rest of the week there at the RNC?
No, the excitement's only going to build, of course. At the 2016 RNC, Donald Trump kind of remade how you enter the auditorium with, it was kind of like a World Wrestling opening with the screens pulling aside and the smoke and the cheers. These are the things that are going to start people that we're going to be building up to. Well, people are coming in and out all day and every day. More and more as it gets closer to the end, politicians and interested and famous people are going to be showing up here. The left-wing marches appear to have basically petered out. There was only one, and it kind of lost steam. So that you don't have to deal with that aspect, but there will be a whole lot more to be bringing back to you on Blaze News tonight the next few days.
We will be looking forward to it. Thanks so much for your time today, Chris.
Great to be here.
The head of the Secret Service will be keeping her job, even though Trump almost lost his head. That is coming up. And we want to be sure to thank Patriot Mobile for providing the Wi-Fi that is making this broadcast possible all convention long. And they want to thank you for supporting us with a special offer. Go to patriotmobile.com/RNC24 for a free month of service. We'll be back right after this. The Secret Service is on high alert amid a reported Iranian plot to kill Donald Trump. Erik Prince is a former Navy SEAL and security expert. Erik, this news just broke today. How credible is this that the intelligence with the Iranians are trying to make a move against Donald Trump?
I think this is a desperate effort to deflect from a completely botched job of protecting the leading Republican candidate and frontrunner for the next presidency. This idea that that's pretty thin. Someone can always say they heard something on SIGINT and make that claim. I don't give that a whole lot of credibility.
Yeah, the headline came from CNN and it said Secret Service is ramped up after receiving this intelligent briefing. So if this is the ramped up version, Erik, is this the best that the United States Secret Service could provide for the former president?
Well, they were already at the equivalent of economy class in terms of security level on Saturday. Further distracted from protecting Trump were the needs for Jill Biden, who was doing an event in Pittsburgh the same day, This is the same Joe Biden that instructed the Marine Band, which normally plays Hail to the Chief when the president walks into a room. She had the Marine Band generate her own version of Hail to the First Lady for her walk-on music. So this woman has the will to power. She is a true danger to America.
Erik, I mean, it's unbelievable. Thanks for being on with us. I know you're busy today, right? You're out and about, but have you followed any of these developments breaking by the hour? Because it's almost every hour that goes by, I'm shocked. Everyone here is shocked and horrified by what we're seeing. What are some of the things you're hearing that have unfolded today that really trouble you?
Well, the story continues to get worse. I mean, not only did the Secret Service, the advance, completely fail to identify the most likely place that a sniper would locate. We call that the sniper hotel, right? It's anyone that stands where the president will be speaking from. Where's the most likely place a sniper is going to set up? Obviously, they completely missed that. They didn't have those areas covered, didn't have anyone in the water tower or anything else. But now you understand that there was a SWAT team that was assigned, but it was too hot for them to be on the roof. Or then the director of the Secret Service says, well, it was too dangerous because the roof is too steep. That roof was maybe a 12-degree slope. It's nothing. It's more excuses on top of nonsense on why they did such a horrible job. I think it's very important for people to realize world wars have started because of failed executive security. When the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was assassinated in 1914, it literally dragged all of Europe into a world war, which rewrote the borders in Europe and killed millions of people, which led to World War II, which killed tens of millions of people. Imagine America today if Donald Trump had been struck by that bullet in his brain and killed on Saturday. We would be in a very different America right now, and it is really bad to minimize that danger and for the administration to be covering themselves with nonsense and excuses and a lack of accountability. It's an example of why I wrote in that Twitter post, we suffer from a whole collection of federal agencies that are bloated, obese, unaccountable, and ineffective, and we continue to steer away from a merit-based, execution-based, excellent society to our detriment. We are embarrassed, and we could have literally torn the country asunder if Trump had been killed while supposedly under the protection of the federal government on Saturday.
And that's why
extremely dangerous.
And that's why Kimberly Cheadle is becoming a household name. She was the Secret Service. She is still the Secret Service director. Because she says that she takes responsibility for the disaster, but she's not going to be stepping down. So how do you square those two things, that she's apparently taking responsibility, yet she still remains in the job?
Well, and it's the same way Mayorkas said he has 100% confidence in her. This is the same guy that opened the federal government, our federal borders, and allowed 12 to 15 million people into the country that don't belong here. Again, it'll also come down to a clear choice. I don't believe there'll be any accountability, any correction by the Secret Service or by the administration, because that's just not what they do. They haven't had accountability for a complete debacle in Afghanistan. They build a $230 million pier in Gaza, which gets washed away every week. The Navy loses control of one of the major waterways to the Houthis. And now you have a federal agency that's tasked with protecting the presidential candidates, and they completely fail. It was not Secret Service excellence that saved President Trump. It was bad aim, President Trump turning his head, and probably the flap of an angel's wings. I mean, we literally, the nation dodged a bullet on Saturday.
Erik, last night, President Trump appeared to have more protection around him. But I keep thinking, I think what a lot of Americans are thinking, which is that between now and November, boy, that's a long ways off. And if this is the level of protection we can expect, that's a problem. What do you think about the protection he currently has, and if they've changed it? And I have to ask the same thing that many people I've seen online asking, which I think is very logical. If you were asked to assist President Trump in the campaign, would you?
Of course, we will always answer the call if people need help. But And look, the Secret Service has some excellent people in it. I feel terrible for the excellent ones that are up to the job. I feel terrible that the reputation of the organization has been tarnished by people that don't belong there because they've been hired because of whatever the social engineering priority is of the leadership, instead of just solely focusing on excellence and mission performance. Integrating private contracted support in with the federal effort would be exceedingly difficult and exceedingly dangerous, especially for the private guys, because the federal bureaucracy will always protect itself and will always hang the private guys out to dry. That being said, if the mission required it, and if President Trump actually asked for it, then I'm sure we can find a way to help him out, because it is essential that we have a proper election, and that these issues are solved with the ballot box and not with the cartridge box.
You mentioned the federal agencies. Of course, the FBI has said that they are jumping in and going to investigate it. But with the way that the federal agencies have handled Donald Trump-related issues in the past, how much confidence do you have that they will actually get to the bottom of what happened on Saturday night?
I have zero confidence in the federal government being able to investigate itself anymore. I hope that Congress will demand a panel of experts, of whether it's former highly qualified Secret Service agents, other professional snipers, people that understand the business, give them the subpoena power of Congress, have open, publicized hearings, every one of them. Let the disinfecting qualities of maximum transparency, let people see what happened and what didn't happen, who made what decisions, were the Secret Service snipers really ordered to not fire first if they saw a guy pointing a rifle at President Trump. Let's let someone answer that question in public. That's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this. I have zero confidence of federal bureaucrats investigating federal bureaucrats and having any kind of accountability, because that's just not been the track record of this administration for the last 4 years.
Erik, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time today.
You're welcome.
A federal judge orders the release of a January 6th defendant. That up next. January 6th would prove to be a fateful day for many Capitol protesters as they were sentenced for their just attendance there. However, one J6er is seeing a reversal of fate. Steve Baker is an investigative journalist for Blaze News. And Steve, a federal judge ordered John Strand, a January 6th prisoner, to be released. So before we get into the details of that, can you let us know a little bit more about his story?
Yeah, John Strand is actually one of the more, let's call it infamous stories, certainly one of the more high-profile cases of all of the January 6th defendants. He was a friend and bodyguard of the doctor and attorney we know as Simone Gold, who was the founder of the Frontline, American Doctors. And she was the one that was deplatformed very early from the 2020, COVID lockdowns, and accused of disinformation because she was recommending alternate therapies that were not part of the approved narrative from the administration. And so she was actually a scheduled speaker that day on January 6th. There were licensed events. Many Americans still do not understand that there were 6 legally permitted events scheduled on the Capitol property that day. And she was a scheduled speaker on one of the side stages there, along with some other Congress members as well. Now, the interesting thing about that is that she was escorted over by, her and John Strand were escorted over by the Oath Keepers from the Ellipse, from where the rally was taking place that President Trump was speaking at. And those Oath Keepers escorted her and her personal bodyguard, John Strand, over there. By the time they got to the Capitol, everything had gone to hell in a handbasket. And so there was, nothing but chaos by the time they arrived. The breaches had already taken place. John Strand and Simone Gold did not participate in violence. They did not participate in breaching the Capitol building whatsoever. But when the doors opened, they, like so many hundreds and even thousands of others did in fact go inside peacefully. And she actually decided to deliver her prepared remarks there in the rotunda. She climbed up on the Eisenhower statue with John standing guard beside her. She delivered her remarks there in the great rotunda of the Capitol. And then they peacefully left, just as so many other hundreds and thousands of people did as well. Unfortunately, they were arrested very early on. They were charged not only with a handful of misdemeanors, but both of them were handed that infamous 1512 obstruction of an official proceeding felony, which carried up to 20 years potential imprisonment, 20 years of imprisonment. So what ended up happening is that Simone Gold herself, she ended up taking a plea deal, and she pled down to a single misdemeanor. And for so doing, she was actually sentenced by Judge Christopher Cooper to 60 days in prison. Then John Strand decided that he was not going to take this lying down, that he was going to be a warrior, and despite the odds being, horribly stacked against him, he was going to go to trial, and he did that. He, of course, was convicted on all counts, including the 1512 obstruction charge, the felony, and Judge Cooper sentenced him to 32 months in prison. Now, they committed exactly the same crimes, but because he wasted the government's time and he put them through the hassle of having to prepare for a trial, the difference between the two, Simone got 2 months in prison and he got 32 months in prison for doing exactly the same thing. So that's the basic background of that story. Now what's happening is that because of the Supreme Court's overturning the 1512 obstruction of an official proceeding charge against 355 defendants, him being one of those, Judge Cooper has, and this is a good sign, because the fact that Cooper and some other judges are now releasing these prisoners, they're shortening their sentences or letting them go, or if they haven't gone to trial yet, they're not charging them with this. They're dropping that charge. These are good signs because, and it's especially a good sign because the Department of Justice has already announced that they want to figure out how to continue with that charge. They feel like they have a little bit of a loophole in the Supreme Court justices' ruling to continue that charge or to even enhance it. And that's a whole other story. But the point being is it appears that the judges are pushing back against the DOJ. Now, the judges are not part of the DOJ. The judges are part of the judiciary branch. DOJ is part of the executive branch. So there seems to be a little bit of pushback, and we'll take this as a good sign.
Steve, we have an article on theblaze.com that shows that January 6th arrests are up from last year, from where they were at this point the year before. So how are we now sitting here in 2024 and we're still getting arrests made for January 6th?
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have Joe Hanneman with us. He not only wrote the story here about John Strand on The Blaze, but also the article that you're referencing right now. And he's just the best of the best. So we want to welcome him as well. But they're not relenting. The Department of Justice has a narrative that they are going to contend driving home till the bitter end. Now, obviously, we know that if Trump does win the presidency, that he has promised that at the very least, all of the nonviolent misdemeanor defendants from January 6th will be pardoned, have their sentences commuted, whatever the case may be. That, interestingly, has turned me into a single issue voter this year, but that's another story as well. But yeah, the numbers are up. They are daily announcing new arrests, not only felony arrests, not only arrests of people that did violence. And we don't understand why they're taking so long. We know that they have identified over 100 violent offenders that they still have not charged yet. And it's very interesting because they continue to also arrest the grandmas and the what I call the accidental tourists who saw the open doors and not to storm the Capitol, but out of curiosity. Look, honey, the door's open, and they walked in, and then their lives changed, often ruined as a result of that.
Steve, I echo your comments about Joe Hanneman. We're very happy to have him aboard, and some of the work he's already doing with you and otherwise is incredible. So if you haven't seen this, you need to go to theblaze.com and check these articles out. This is going to be a great addition to our team. I wanted to note that in that article about this man who's finally released, going to finally be released after all this time, he really got pilloried in the press, did he not? I mean, he got hammered. They made fun of him, like, he's a model, and he's an idiot because he didn't take the plea. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you read Joe's article that came, I believe it was posted today, about John Strand, he was a warrior. He decided that he was going to go through the fire. He was going to stand on the First Amendment and what they were doing. These were people, John Strand as Simone's friend and bodyguard, and Simone Gold as somebody who was going to be legally exercising her First Amendment right that day. The only thing that changed for them was the location of where she was going to deliver her remarks. She moved because the stage was no longer outside. They saw the flow of traffic into the building. They moved in with the crowd peacefully, eventually set up shop, so to speak, set up a stage there inside the rotunda, and she delivered her speech. But he decided that he was going to be a warrior. And as Joe references in the article, he referenced the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the Old Testament, and he was going to go through the fire. And let me tell you something, at a 99.75% conviction rate for January 6th defendants, he knew what the outcome was likely to be. And then he, of course, faced that and received that 32-month sentence. The great thing is because he's now already served almost 12 months and having that 1512 charge dropped, Judge Cooper has decided to release him, and he will be released, I believe, on the 24th of this month.
You mentioned Judge Cooper, Judge Christopher Cooper. You've told us a quote before about him. He said that J6 is about a lot of things, but it ain't about the First Amendment. So what is it about?
Judge Cooper famously made that statement during Simone Gold's sentencing hearing. Now, what is really interesting when he says that January 6th is about a lot of things, but it ain't, and by the way, he said ain't, that's not my Louisiana interpolation to what he said. But the interesting part about that is when he says it's not about the First Amendment, that's absolutely absurd, because for 99.998% of the people that attended the rally, attended the event, and went to the Capitol that day, it was absolutely 100% about the First Amendment, whether you agreed with their stance, their position, their politics, their statements, their chanting, whether they believed that there was a stolen election or not. It was about protected speech. And that's exactly what Simone Gold and exactly what John Strand were exercising that day. It was, in fact, about the First Amendment.
Steve, that's one of the most important points I think that you make over and over again, and everyone needs to really hearken to your words. I mean, the opposite is true. This judge basically stated the opposite of the truth of the matter, and you've certainly convinced me and many others here. But Judge Cooper is someone that you know all too well, and it would be great if you could explain why and update us on where you are at.
Well, as it happens, Judge Cooper actually is my assigned judge in my misdemeanor January 6th case. And we've already had some interesting turnabouts with Judge Cooper. I have received 2-minute orders for being in violation of my pretrial restrictions, which are not true. These were passed along to Judge Cooper from a pretrial services officer in D.C. who flat out lied to him within a week after my arrest there in Dallas, which you guys were both there that day at the Dallas federal courthouse. Within a week of that, we received a minute order ordering me to be in compliance with my pretrial restrictions. He was told by that PSO in D.C. that I was out of compliance. That was absolutely 100% untrue. Then when we appealed, and we filed a motion rather, for the return of my rights to protect myself, because in my travels, I have need of that. Not only that, but we have demonstrated to the court that we've had people actually get on airplanes and fly halfway across the country to stalk me. We've had other threats as well as a result of my reporting. And in our motion to be granted the right for me to carry my firearm, which I'm currently still denied, he was again lied to by the DC PSO and told that I had threatened, this is what she said to him, that I had threatened a high-ranking legislator during the riot. And for that reason, he issued another minute order rather than actually responding to the legal arguments found in our motion. So he listened to the lie of the PSO once again, publicly made a minute order against me, and then the net result of that is we're going over his head. We have filed an appeal now to the circuit court in D.C. to take that directly to him and see if we can't get my rights back.
Listen, Steve, we've talked about this. I'm not stalking you. I'm just trying to say hi when you're at the office, okay? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Jill.
Jack Black's bandmate misfires on his comments about the attempt on Trump's life when we return. Jack Black announced his band Tenacious D is discontinuing its tour after bandmate Kyle Gass's onstage birthday wish in Australia. Gass said, quote, "Don't miss Trump next time." Afterwards, Gass made an apology post on Instagram with the caption, "This line I improvised on stage Sunday night in Sydney. It was highly inappropriate, dangerous, and a terrible mistake." So Matt, you were in California over the weekend. Do the liberal entertainers really think that they can just talk like that without backlash now?
Yes. And what you see here is really the effect of just living in a bubble, right? I mean, here you have people who have been able to say awful, disgusting things about our leaders for a long time, for 8 years, and it's metastasized. It gets worse and worse every year. And now, all of a sudden, there's some accountability for it because of a miracle that occurred this Saturday when President Trump miraculously dodged a bullet and then shook his fist in the air, remaining in defiance. And this has redefined how people look at Trump. You can call him a Nazi all you want, but when you see what just happened, it does something very visceral deep inside of people. And what's great about this in terms of stopping the madness in the culture is that all of a sudden, this band member and these other, cultural figures, these other Hollywood elites, they realize they're going to pay the cost. There's going to be accountability for this ridiculous stuff they've been saying in their bubble, this reckless rhetoric that's exceedingly dangerous that they've been engaging in for so long. That used to be good for them. People would pat them on the back and say, good. And now all of a sudden you see them waking up, looking around and going, oh, wait a minute, I really shouldn't have said that. That was highly inappropriate. I'm very sorry. And because they see that something has dramatically changed. The entire landscape has changed in the space of only a few days.
It goes back to the emotions that you were talking about at the very beginning of today's show and how everything now is different than it was when we left on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, one of the things I go back to here, because if you just think of the cultural landscape of what's appropriate to say and what's not, is the last few days what you can see, and this is so important. It's so important, and I don't know how long it will last, but I hope it just keeps on going. I hope we all push forward and keep on going. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that all of a sudden, not only is it not okay to say hateful, disgusting things about the former president of the United States, but that all of a sudden people are emboldened to say, I actually do support the president. I actually have views that I'm not ashamed to talk about anymore. I see Trump's bravery, and I'm not going to stop telling people that I support that man. Why should I have to be persecuted for my political beliefs as an American in my job, in my workplace, right, in my community? And people have been cowed into silence for so long. And what you've seen in the last few days is that breaking apart. I mean, people in places, in liberal places throughout the country, wearing MAGA hats, et cetera, people who never voted before saying, I am now going to vote in this election for this man. People who were on the left, right, we're sort of questioning over the last few years, who are looking at Joe Biden on the one hand and Donald Trump on the other and saying, I'm moving in this direction. That is potentially a tectonic shift. And what it does is it changes the entire quality of life in the deepest spiritual sense for all of us, right? Because you can, God forbid, be free to live what you see as true and to speak it.
And two of the biggest names that have jumped on board since the Trump assassination, Elon Musk, Bill Ackman. There are many others, but those are two of the biggest names. And something that we talked about on the night of the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden was back in 2016, you had the reluctant Trump voter. People didn't want to come out and say that they were going to vote for Donald Trump. That is a completely different scenario than we are seeing right now in 2024, where you have some of the richest men in the world coming out and putting their necks on the line and saying, you know what, I'm not only for Donald Trump, I'm going to come out and fully endorse Donald Trump for president.
Yeah, I think Elon's reaction, I mean, I love Elon. I mean, I really love Elon Musk. I know there's people who don't trust him. I don't know if he's on our side. Just the spiritedness of this man. In the moment, he represented a lot of other people. Elon Musk represented millions of people when, after watching what happened, he said, you know what? Not only am I saying this is awful, I fully endorse the president of the United States, and now he's going to give him $45 million a month. You know how many people are screeching? This is like the Dark Lord is screeching in his throne in every blue city of America, because all of a sudden, guess what? The tables have turned. You probably shouldn't have angered this guy. But once people saw that moment and they saw Trump's bravery, it inspires other people to say, I'm not going to stay in the shadows anymore. What Musk did, what Ackman did is really important, because our society looks up to all the wannabe elites, all the little, achievers trying to move forward. They're the ones who are scared because their jobs, the jobs they want, we all know this, right? The jobs we want in fancy jobs in law and medicine and whatever, you can't say what you believe if you're on the right. Well, what Musk does when he leads like this is he opens up the possibility that no, actually, real elites, listen to what Erik Prince was saying earlier, real elites who care about excellence and merit and really want to build good, true, and beautiful things, people who are on the right side of history, they're going in this direction and they're not afraid to speak out. Again, this is the enormous importance of this change. It just can't be emphasized enough. It flips the entire tables around.
It's the first Tenacious D reference on Blaze News tonight. It probably won't be the last. But when I heard this story, I thought back to the Dixie Chicks, which are now just known as the Chicks, by the way, because of wokeness. We can't be called the Dixie Chicks anymore. They had to go through and change their name. They famously said, we are, sad to see that George W. Bush is also from Texas, ensuing chaos, right? People were burning all of their Dixie Chicks memorabilia. Their careers were never the same. It's interesting now, again, that we are seeing the backlash. Is this here to stay?
Jill, that is the great question. I mean, the great question right now, it really does look like a landslide, a tectonic shift moving towards November. Who would want to run against Donald Trump right now? You can feel it in the culture. So I certainly hope so. I sense that it is momentous. It's real. At the same time, never underestimate your enemies. And there's a long time to go, as I said earlier, between now and November. And the media is not going to change its opinions. They're scared right now. They're scared of all of you out there. They're scared of public opinion. They're scared of people standing up and saying what they believe proudly. And all of a sudden, they're not the ones who are getting accolades. They're getting yelled at. They're getting shouted down. Okay, let's keep it going.
Yes,
and I certainly hope so.
I love it. I mean, this is what we've been waiting for. Now, do we have the ability to continue on? We've seen the Bud Light movement, right? They are no longer here. They were taken down big time. So we're here to stay. Now, is this movement in Hollywood here to stay, though? We can see it in some of the purchasing power that conservatives are using, but is this going to remain in Hollywood, in deep blue Hollywood? That will be remaining to be seen. I'll
tell you what, they're Hollywood just like everywhere else. Lots of talented people ready to break out.
Awesome. Well, you know what? We are going to have some great talented people with us the rest of the week because we have full coverage of the Republican National Convention. So make sure that you go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Blaze News Tonight.